Hello everyone, my name is Rebecca. A few weeks ago, my husband made the offer of helping me out with a video if I needed. I think I was complaining about coming up with video ideas or something. He offered to draw some art so I can redraw it. So this week, I decided to take him up on his offer. My husband always comes up with really interesting designs for his drawings that often push my creativity, so it's always fun seeing what he comes up with. In the past, my husband has only worked with traditional mediums, but this time I convinced him to give digital art a try. He was nervous, but willing to give it a shot. I started by setting up Clip Studio Paint in a way to hopefully make things easier for him. I color-coded the essential tools I thought he would need. I also pre-made layers for him, just in case he wanted to use layers, but I kind of figured he wouldn't. As usual, I didn't record Josh drawing because I didn't want to put extra pressure on him, but I remembered that Clip Studio Paint automatically captures the process. So let's see what his process was like for the first picture. Oh, but first a disclaimer, my husband is very new to drawing and has only drawn a handful of times for these videos. He only draws for me, basically. Also, I have to majorly slow down this footage because it goes by really fast, so it might look a bit odd. Anyways, this first part was where I was explaining things to him, and he was also getting used to drawing on the tablet. Then it seems my husband started to draw a character that was sort of alien-like. However, he must have not liked this one because he started to draw a new character. As my husband was drawing, he expressed that he didn't know what he was doing, and that he felt like the character looked like a Sour Patch Kid teenager or something. And I didn't really know what he meant because I wasn't looking at the screen while he was drawing. But once I looked at it, I did kind of see what he meant. So I'll be trying to draw this in my style. And to be honest, I don't really know what I'm totally going to do with this, but let's see what I'll do. This character is drawn straight on and it's a headshot view. For my drawing, I'll be keeping this angle and we'll also be keeping it as a headshot. A lot of times for these videos, I'll draw the first picture more true to what my husband drew, and then for the second picture, I'll let myself take more artistic liberties. I drew the facial expression with kind of a cheeky grin since the original had a turned smile. Like I said at first, I wasn't sure what I was going to do with this picture. However, since my husband kept calling this drawing a Sour Patch teen, I thought I would try to kind of lean into that a bit. When I looked at Sour Patch Kids, they kind of have what looks like curly or puffy hair. So I did slightly change the shape of the hair from Josh's drawing to mimic the Sour Patch Kids. Besides that, I kept a lot of the details the same. My first sketch was relatively clean, so I didn't feel a need for a second sketch. Instead, I'm jumping into line art. Like I mentioned, my husband was apprehensive to try digital art, but I kind of talked him into it. Something I did notice though is that art programs are pretty complicated. When I was prepping the workspace for Josh to use, I started to notice just how many different options and buttons and tools there are. I was like, wow, this probably does look very confusing when you don't know what any of this stuff does. Since I've been using digital art software since I was 14, it all kind of makes sense to me. But I do remember that when I was new to it, it was all so confusing and also very frustrating at times. Like I remember one time, I just wanted to find the curving line tool and I could not find it. I literally spent hours trying to find it. And I eventually found an answer online that I had to press a button on the keyboard to make the line tool switch to the curving line tool. And I was very happy when I figured that out, but also it was so annoying. Thankfully, my husband is a very fast learner, and I only had to explain the basics for him to be able to create some art. I basically just showed him the pen tool, eraser tool, selection tool, and fill tool. I went over the basic features of the selection tool and showed him how to change the brush size for the brushes and eraser. I did also briefly explain the layers, but my husband expressed that he would only be using one of those. Kind of like I thought he would. So now it was time for the shading, but before jumping into that, I wanted to add a sugar-like texture. Like I said, I'm kind of leaning into the Sour Patch Kid thing. I found a brush that makes random dots and kind of just went all over the character with this brush to make the sugar texture. For the shading, I also wanted it to have a texture to it, so I used mostly pencil tools to apply a lot of the shading, and also used the running color on Fiber Blender to blend out the colors because that blender has a bit more of a texture to it. I was trying to shade things in a similar way to the art I was seeing of Sour Patch Kids. I feel like I got the hair to look kind of gummy-like, but I was having a harder time getting the same look for the skin, since the face itself has harder edges and isn't as round as the hair. Plus, for some reason, I never really like shading red. Every time I say that, I get people telling me which colors I need to shade red with, and I do understand what colors I should use to shade red. It's just for some reason I never like the process very much. However, for the next piece, it also has red, and I'm really happy with how that one turned out. So, yay. I do have to admit, while working on this picture, I was having a bit of an artist identity crisis because I couldn't tell if I wasn't feeling happy with the picture because of how I was drawing it. Like maybe I didn't like the proportions or the shading, or if I didn't totally like it because the source I'm working from is very different from my usual. I was feeling very conflicted the entire time and I couldn't quite figure out why I didn't quite like the picture. I think the main thing that was throwing me off is the eyes. The scleras are yellow and the irises are white, so the values are very different from usual, and I feel like it just makes the face look kind of off balance to me or something. I also couldn't tell if I liked how I rendered the nose. For some reason my brain keeps wanting to render noses differently, and I can't tell how I feel about it. I first did it this way in this piece of Elliot, and I liked how it went there, but I couldn't tell if I liked it here. So yeah. Oh, also, I wanted to say thank you so much to all of you because we reached the 100 unit goal for the Pariah plush. I wasn't sure if we would do it, but we did, and I'm so happy. Thank you all so much for your support and encouragement. It truly means so much to me. Like I have said before, I've always had the dream of my characters being a plush, and I'm so happy that this dream has come true. To all of you who pre-ordered the plushies, they are going into production, and it will take a little while to make them. My manufacturer said they will be shipped out either around early December or early January, but they could possibly ship out even before that. So yeah, thank you all so much. But back to the art now. Lastly, I wanted to add a little bit to the background to make it less blank. So I added in dots of different colors from the character. I thought this would kind of mimic the sort of sugar pattern that's on the character. And I also added a subtle gradient. And here's my drawing of Sour Patch Teen. Maybe this boy ate way too many Sour Patch Kids to the point that he became part Sour Patch Kid. We will be comparing my drawing to Josh's later, and we will also have Josh react to my pictures. But for now, let's take a look at the second drawing. So for this drawing, my husband said he was going to try to draw just a normal human. A lot of times my husband likes to use very interesting colors, and it kind of makes the people that he draws look sort of not human, but this one's supposed to be just a human. Also, he decided to draw a full body picture. He most of the time only draws heads, so he was really going out of his comfort zone for this one. I felt so proud. He named this character Orlando, so let's try to draw Orlando in my style. Now, I could have drawn Orlando in a simple standing front view pose, but to be honest, that didn't interest me very much and sounded kind of boring, so I wanted to spice things up for myself. I thought I could draw Orlando from a bird's eye view. I posted this 3D model to use as a reference. I wanted the pose to feel kind of cool, I suppose. Orlando seemed to have kind of a smirk to his face, so I felt like he was a confident kind of character. Now, I didn't absolutely hate how this first sketch was going, especially since forced perspective is always pretty tricky to draw, but I decided to compare it to the 3D model, and it was fairly off, especially for the lower body. At this point, I had two trains of thought in my head. The first one was saying, Becca, you should take this as a learning opportunity. Just keep drawing the pose and comparing it to the 3D model until you get it to look right. And the second voice was saying, Becca, just draw over the model. It'd be so much faster. And today, guys, I listened to the second voice. I was weak. No, but honestly, I never think anything of it when I see other artists use 3D models as bases for their work. They really are a time saver, and you do still have to have an understanding of perspective to get things to look right. If you directly trace a model and don't know how to get the details you're drawing on top to also be in perspective, things will look weird very fast. Plus, I'm not tracing over the model one-to-one. I slightly change things to fit my preferences and how I want things to look. Also, I did decide to have Orlando wear cargo pants because the pants he wore seem to have a lower inseam, and that makes me think of cargo pants. And Josh didn't really draw Orlando with shoes, but I didn't want to draw feet, so I'm making him wear shoes that will be a tan color. It might be a little bit of a cheat, but yeah. Before jumping into the line art, I kept feeling like I didn't really like this arm. I liked the concept of it, but it felt like it was breaking the flow of the piece. It kind of stuck out a little bit too much. So I covered up that arm and sketched in a new one that was posed in a similar way to the other. I felt like this had a much better flow to it, even if it's maybe less interesting. Now I was on to line art. I wanted to go with a more bold line art look. I will also have the line art be thicker towards the top, and it will get thinner as we go to the shoes. This will help with the feeling of depth in the piece. Also, like I sometimes do, I'll be playing the footage at a slower pace, but I won't be showing you the entire line art footage. While drawing, my husband kind of kept grumbling at my pen because it has 2 express keys on it and he kept accidentally pressing them while drawing. I thought about maybe trying to disable the buttons, but my tablet hasn't been saving settings when I change them. So yeah, my husband did have to put up with that. Also, I did try to draw Orlando with a kind of different nose shape. I was trying to draw it like the nose that Josh drew, but I was just not able to visualize this nose shape in this view. In fact, I was having a hard time visualizing a nose at all. So to help me out a bit, I dragged in a 3D model. It's one of the default assets in Clip Studio Paint, and I kind of just posed it in a similar view, and this helped a lot. Sometimes I'm just not able to visualize something, and I need a reference to help me out. Also, drawing this hairstyle was very interesting. I don't draw combed back hairstyles very often, especially from this camera angle. Drawing it wasn't too bad, but I was very nervous to color it later. I did really like drawing the cargo pants and all the details on those. They were really fun. I decided that I was going to use this piece as practice for rendering clothing folds, since I feel like it's been a while since I got to really render clothes and how it folds. Oh, and for the shoes, I was going to draw like Converse or something, but I decided to draw shoes kind of based off of these ones. Since Josh didn't draw shoes, I thought it'd be better to go with a more simple shoe style. Once the line art was done, it was time for coloring. I wanted to add some depth by adding a cast shadow on the ground. I had sketched out the general shape, but to get all the details correct, I selected Orlando and filled in the selection with a muted purple. It was a bit tricky, but I then started transforming the silhouette to be in perspective. I used the sketch I made earlier of the shadow as a reference. At first I wasn't sure if this was going to work, but after playing around with it for a bit, I got it to look how I wanted. This is a really easy way to kind of get the details correct for cast shadows. Next, I applied some colors with an airbrush to help push the feeling of depth. I used a dark purple along the midsection, a light blue towards the bottom, and for the top I used a light yellow set to add glow. Next, I'm roughly placing down the shadows for the clothing. I'm blocking them in with my pen tool, and then once I finish doing this, I'll use the blending tool to refine the shapes and fade them out. Like I said, I wanted to use this piece as a form of clothing practice. Because the outfit itself is very simple, and I'm not worrying about a bunch of little details, I'm able to really focus on the fabric and rendering it. Plus, like I said, I feel like it's been a while since I got to practice doing this. In more recent months, I've been drawing in my chibi elf style more often, and for that style, I simplify the clothing and its form quite a lot. Plus, my chibi elf style doesn't have very detailed rendering, so I don't get to shade the folds in a detailed way. So it was really nice getting to sink some time into rendering the clothes, and it felt like really good practice. While blending out the shadows and applying the shading, I try not to let myself get too zoomed into the canvas. If I zoom in a lot, I get really nitpicky with the blending lines or small details that you won't even really see. And this isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it's just not super needed. And sometimes things end up better if you focus on parts as a whole instead of getting too focused on individual areas. I want to make sure that the folds are all flowing together, so if I focus on areas separately, they may end up not flowing all together. Off topic, but it feels like there's been a lot going on in life, but also not much at the same time. I guess my husband and I are going to be taking a trip at the end of the month. It's kind of strange how often I go on trips now. Well, I mean, it's technically only been like 2 trips a year, but that's a lot more than compared to the 0 a year I used to take before I was married. Because of the trip, I'm working my schedule around the trip, so that has been making things feel more busy feeling. thankfully I will have that float week coming up, so that will be a lot of help. I've also been continuing my driving lessons. And yes, I'm still working on getting my license, but I am making very good progress. I actually drove to church with my husband recently, and it went very smoothly. I do still get nervous when driving for sure, but not nearly as much as I used to, especially once I get kind of warmed up. The more frequently I drive, the more easy I can kind of get into the groove of it. We do have a student driver magnet that we put on the car, and that helps me a lot actually, mostly because in my brain it makes me feel like people are less likely to get annoyed at me, or like people might be more aware that I may do something odd or slightly unexpected. But yeah, I am improving at driving, so that's good. I am excited to be able to drive myself places. It will be really nice and handy. Oh, so here I'm shading the hair, and like I said, I was pretty nervous for shading it, mostly because of the shape of it, and it's a very different style from what I usually draw. I kind of just started by shading the strands of hair that I had defined with the line art. I also tried to shade the parts where the hair sort of flows up and down, almost like a hill, if that makes sense. I then went in with highlights on the defined strands of hair. I applied them roughly and then blended them out with the blending tool to better refine the shapes of the highlights. This wasn't feeling too bad, but for some of the areas, the hair felt too empty or like they needed more detail. So I placed in some more strand-like shapes with darker colors, and also added some shapes that looked like hair strands with lighter colors. It's kind of like I was painting in the hair strands, and I feel like it resulted in a look that I was wanting. So I was nervous at first, but I ended up being very pleased with the result, so I'm happy about that. And now we are on to the finishing details. We have the eyes. My husband made them white again, so I'm just shading them in with grays. I wasn't sure how dark I should allow the shadows to get, but I still wanted the eyes to have a good amount of contrast, so I made the shadows get pretty dark. Next, I wanted to make the lighting a bit more dynamic, so I added some color rim light around Orlando. On the left, I added yellow, and on the right, I added blue. I just felt like this would help him pop and make things kind of fun. Lastly, to make this picture feel less void-like, I added a tile pattern to the colored square. This also helps establish the perspective a bit more. For this, I used the perspective ruler that is made with the 3D model, so I don't have to worry about the lines not being in perspective with the character. And so here is Orlando. The perspective was really interesting to experiment with, along with his character details. Overall, I feel like he turned out pretty cool looking. So now that I have finished both pictures, I will get my husband and reveal the pictures to him. Actually, I have to wait till he gets home from work, so I'll be back in a few hours. Okay, so now I have Josh here with me.
Hello, it is me.
And we're going to show him the art. So here is your picture again. Like I said before, I did lean into the Sour Patch part. So, yeah.
Ooh, that's good. I enjoy you kept the eyebrows and the cheeky smile. I said this is one thing I did kind of try to pull off, but obviously I'm not an expert at all. I like the colors and the little sprinkles all over them. Makes it kind of give off the sugary Sour Patchness. I was always kind of worried that I used bad colors for what you had to work with, and yeah, you made them all come together nicely.
I did slightly tweak them to kind of make them harmonize a little bit more. And I did make his hair very puffy because Sour Patch Kids have more like puffy hair. So yeah. I went with the puffy hair.
No, I like it. It looks nice. It looks way better than what I did.
Okie dokie. And so now we have Orlando.
Orlando. I like Orlando. He was cool.
Yeah, I actually did think he looked like he was like a cool person. So I tried to draw him like looking cool.
Ooh, he looks cool. I like the stance. The guy knows how to look fashionable. It is very, very well done.
Oh, thank you.
Wow, that looks amazing. I was curious where you were going to take that one, since it was kind of just a dude standing there. I was trying to make him interesting, but you really took that to the limit.
So yeah, those are my drawings.
Very nice. Wow, you again have taken them just in a whole different direction than I never thought was possible with the measly little drawings that I had made prior. Just simple like sketch thing.
Yeah, it is always interesting though, because like a lot of times the characters you draw are like simple or like unique in their own little way, and they do always somehow push me to do something new or different or just out of my comfort zone a little bit, even though like technically they're always like more simple, but somehow they're always very challenging at the same time.
Yeah, well, I'm glad I could give you a good challenge. So.
It's always fun.
I don't want to make this easy for you, so. But I also am not good at drawing, so I just am doing whatever I can really do. But
and that's all we need.
that's good.
So those are the results of me redrawing my husband's art. It's always a really fun and interesting time. Before we end, I want to thank my super awesome YouTube members and Patreon patrons for their support. It means so much to me. And thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you all in my next video. Bye!